you guys? What's going on, YouTubers? YouTubers, Touch Base Daily audience, family, friends. I am on my way to my next, what are we gonna call it? Seminar, panel discussion on how to photograph the upcoming election. That's where I'm heading to now. I am walking back to Photoville. I just had lunch and powered my gear because I took, I should say, I recorded the last lesson on how to be tips on being a journalism and so journalist, photojournalist, and it was absolutely excellent. And I learned so much, and I'm looking forward to the future of photojournalism and getting out there, meeting with some folks, connecting with them. Absolutely wonderful. So I'm walking over, so I'll give you a glimpse of what's going on again, because that's how we roll. All these amazing people. How you doing, sir?
All right, well.
Hello. So, see all these wonderful exhibitions and all these containers here under the Brooklyn Bridge. Hello. And so I'm on my way to, this is amazing right here. There's folks from everywhere enjoying it. Great to have a little cloud cover today because the sun is not all on you. Okay, I'm heading to the desk.
What's your first name?
Can I get it all out? My name is Ron Foster.
Yes, I remember you this morning. Go ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me, guys. So I am going in and I'm going to be quiet. Oh, they haven't started yet. Excellent. So best practices. Okay. I'm going to hang out on
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
this side.
I think technically she would be. I don't know how she classifies herself, but I think she's like. Okay. And then I'm just the student journalist who's everywhere. Okay.
Hello again. Hello again. These are amazing people. So guys, yes, I'm gonna hang out with you guys for a little bit while I'm waiting for the event to start. And it's been an amazing Photoville day at Photoville. It's like something's on the chairs. Just water. Okay, I'm in. I'm set. Getting my bag off. Taking my camera off. And here we go. Okay, sorry for all the motion and movements, but just getting squared away. And it's exciting. This is wonderful. I love this event. If you have not been to Photoville yet, you need to come on down. We still have about 4 or 5 hours left of this for today. I think it ends at 6 today. And so check it out. The last conversation was excellent. I learned so much, and it was so full of how to be learning what to do, what not to do as a photojournalist. And hey, Dr. Tachi's in the building. What's going on, Dr. Tachi? Shout out to Dr. Tachi from Indie Suit Media. She's out and about as usual. Yes, I am out and about tomorrow. Oh, speaking of that, tomorrow we'll be starting our second season of Touch Base Daily, and we'll have some amazing special guests coming up in the season. And so I'm excited about that. And we will continue to be on with with Indie Suit Media. And I want to bring more content, better content, so that way we can really help people in the creative space, photography, and also those that are doing photography, as in also because I want to do more photojournalism, even though I do more of it as in more contained, for instance, like for the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music, the Fort Greene Conservancy, Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, Those are my clients, but I'm also doing photojournalism because these photos go into production or into the media for people to know what's happening in the city. Long story short, they're getting ready to start, and I don't want to disturb it. So what I'm going to end up doing is I will have you join in. I'll just be recording quietly and including you on this event. Again, this is how to photograph the upcoming election for photographers. This is about how to photograph as photojournalists in the next photo, the next election. Here they go.
I'm going to speak very close to the microphone here. Hi everyone, thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to Photoville 2024, our 13th year of the festival, day 2. We're here for you. We are so happy to have you here. We're so happy to be back here in the village, and we are so happy to be here presenting this just incredibly important information, this workshop talk session. I really have to work on the terminology. We're so happy to have you all here for this session about safely covering the U.S. elections, brought to you by the Committee to Protect Journalists and the ACOS Alliance with the camera. I've worked in journalism. I guess a few here have worked in journalism. This is obviously, we all know, a pretty difficult time. It's never a great time. It's a really difficult time right now, and we all know that coming up to November is going to be pretty interesting. So we're here to, help you with all of that. One last thing before I hand off the mic is, some of you might have been here already for our Safety 101 workshop. We will be building slightly on those materials, but of course you will be able to absorb what's going on. Also on Thursday, June 6th, we'll be having a virtual session at 11 a.m. You can go to photoville.nyc to find those events. That will be going over safety starts with a contract, which is basically making sure that you as a freelancer, and I'm going to guess there's a couple of you here, can make sure your contracts are actually taking care of you. Finally, last part, after this session, we're going to have a little bit of a get-together in the beer garden over there, so hang around and then join us for a bit of community building afterwards. Okay, I have rambled on. I'm going to hand you off to Lucy Westcott, and we're going to get this show on the road.
Hello everyone, I'll be very quick. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We are so grateful, of course, to Photoville for the opportunity to talk to you all today about how to safely cover the US election, and to our wonderful partners at the ACOS Alliance. For many, many years now, CPJ and ACOS have been working together at Photoville to make sure journalists stay safe. Please put your hands up, ACOS, so that if you have any questions afterwards, Molly and Elizabeth there can answer them. I'm thrilled to introduce my CPJ emergencies colleagues today, Ella Stapley, who is CPJ's digital safety specialist, and Colin Pereira, who is CPJ's high-risk safety advisor. They are going to run you through digital safety, physical safety best practices, how to save reporting protests, and we'll go over some risk assessment and planning as well. Thank you again. We're outside with materials. We're here all afternoon, so if you have any further questions, let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. My name is Ella Stapley. I am the digital security specialist at the Committee to Protect Journalists on the emergencies team. I'm a former freelance journalist, and I've been working in digital safety now for the media for about 10 years. So today I'll be talking you through some best practice for digital safety. But before I get to that, I'm going to hand over to Colin so he can introduce himself and talk a little bit about why we're here today.
Hi, so I'm Colin. I look after journalists working in high-risk locations, mostly, so it came as a bit of a surprise when I was asked to keep lots of questions about the US, quite frankly. And I've been doing this for about 20 years, so it's quite disappointing that in the last decade, the US has featured quite highly on our radar of high-risk locations. This is a presentation that we've been traveling around different newsrooms on the East Coast, teaching journalists in news organizations how to stay safe. So we've cut a little bit down because obviously there was a session this morning and there's a bit of overlap. So I hope there's not too much repetition. But before I start, can I just see a show of hands? How many people are actually practicing journalists? Hands up. Okay, great. How many people are photojournalists? How many people are freelancers? And how many people are staff members? Okay, great. Okay, that's really interesting for us. So, like I say, what we've been doing is going around different newsrooms and talking about safety in advance of the election. And what journalists have been telling us and what they've been asking for from newsrooms is they basically want to know about protests and how to stay safe at a protest, good practice, good digital safety hygiene, and why the police do things in the way that they do. And we are very fortunate because a lot of our colleagues at the Committee to Protect Journalists, they collect a lot of data about what's going on with journalists and they look at the individual cases. And what we've seen in the since Black Lives Matter is we've seen a lot of incidents of violence and threats against journalists where on many occasions they could not avoid what was happening to them. Right? They were injured and hurt and arrested and there was simply nothing they could do. But in some occasions, and a significant number of occasions, if they understood crowd dynamics better, or if they understood what the police were doing when they were doing it, they might have avoided injury or being arrested, quite frankly. And that's what these lessons that we're going to go through are what we've learned over the last 4 years. And what I would say is all the points are not just mine or Ella's points. This is a combination of different journalists' know-how and different safety advisors know-how, and put it all into one slideshow. But there is no monopoly on common sense and good practice, so if you guys have something to say and you don't agree with what we're saying, please speak out. We'll give you the mic and you can tell us what you think about what's happening on the protest side, because you are actually covering these events every day. Great. Oh, you're clicking. Great.
Yes.
My glasses. Okay, so what we've seen in the last few months is a number of protests on campuses and in university locations. And we're very fortunate to have Jason here, who I'm going to pick on later, who has been covering a lot of these in New York. And so this data comes from the US Press Freedom Tracker. Is everyone aware of the US Press Freedom Tracker? Yeah. Okay, great. It's good. I think if you're not aware of it, you should go check it out, because what they do is they give in quite a lot of detail what is happening to journalists on the ground, and they list the incidents and the background to why they were injured or hurt or arrested or whatever it was that has happened. And in that detail, you can tell a lot of things about things that you need to know when you do your risk assessment. But what we know, and forgive me, I took this about 2 weeks ago, this graph, but we know that there have been 13 arrests of journalists on campuses across the country. And we think most of those arrests are student journalists. Actually, we don't think, we know. But it is quite a high number, quite frankly, for people who are just doing their jobs. But we know that a lot of those arrests are connected to trespass. And I'm going to come back to that, why trespass is important. What we also know from the data is that there have been 11 assaults on journalists as they've done their job. And those assaults are not just from the police as they're being arrested, those assaults from protesters who are attacking them. So that is quite a dynamic situation on certain campuses, and we are going to refer back to this quite a lot. Lastly, there have also been a number of, only 3 chilling statements, which is when someone in power, a political figure of some sort, says something that discourages journalists from going down to do their job, because it's a veiled threat of some sort. Everyone happy? Any questions? So it's the US Press Freedom Tracker. And I took this screen about 2 weeks ago. I didn't check it before I started today. But if you go onto it now, it will have the latest number.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk a lot about how to be prepared and a lot of common sense things. And most of you are going to look at me and say, what is this guy talking about? We know how to do this. So forgive me if I'm, to use a very good English phrase, teaching you how to suck eggs. Do you guys have this phrase in America? Yeah. So if I'm teaching you the basics, but I always find it's a good thing to go over the basics so that no one misses out, basically. Okay, so before you go out, what we want you to do is to do a little risk assessment. Right, and that means, and we went into this a lot this morning, but it means saying, what could happen to me, and what is the worst that could happen to me, and how am I going to be prepared for that? And in your toolkit of things that you need to do, is you need to have a check-in procedure as your number one thing that keeps you safe. So the vast majority of you are freelancers, so you need to work out who you're checking in with. So it might be a colleague, it might be a friend, it might be your mom and dad, it might be your commissioning editor, but it might not be. Right? And when you work out your check-in procedure, what you need to say is, it's all context-based. So if the protest is not very dangerous, you don't have to check in as much. But if it is very dangerous, then you should think about checking in more regularly. And so one of the things I do is I'm not just a consultant to the CPJ, I'm a consultant to different newsrooms, and we manage their safety when they're deployed. And when we have people operating in high-risk environments or on protests, we like them to check in every 2 hours. That doesn't mean they phone the safety desk and say, we're all okay. It might mean that they have communications with their editor or their filing so that we know that they're okay. But you need to have regular contact with someone when you're out there. Because I have worked with journalists who have disappeared in the US for up to 48 hours after they've been arrested. And not only has no one known that they're missing, but we haven't even clocked that they're missing. And when they've come out of prison because they were arrested, we were like, oh, where have you been those 48 hours? We haven't even thought to look for them. And that is a very scary situation for them. So you need to have your check-in procedure, and you need to be disciplined about it. Everyone happy about that?
Yes.
Does everyone do that? Yes? Great. So yeah, I'm teaching you how to suck eggs. The other thing to do is wear comfortable shoes. Right? And for photojournalists, I think I had a massive argument once with a photojournalist about the kind of footwear you need to wear. And I was adamant that you need to wear laces, and he said, I've got a great pair of Tasmanian bloodstones. Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
Sort of slip-on boots, get very popular with photojournalists. And he said, these never come off in a protest. I said, okay, I've actually got a pair. So the next protest I went down to, I wore them. And they were a very nice, tight fit, but they did come off at one point when I took them off in my hotel room later. So I wasn't right, he was definitely right. So, but make sure that your shoes stay on, okay? Because a lot of times when you have to run very quickly in a stampede, you lose your footwear. And I used to work for the BBC for 10 years after that, ITN, and I have had occasions where journalists have lost their footwear in very dangerous situations. So pay attention to your boots first. Don't wear nylon because it burns. And I have had to go and get a journalist in the hospital who had her nylon outfit melted to her. So a good thing to wear is denim, right? And sorry, when I say it burns, it melts. Obviously, if Molotov cocktails are flying or there's some sort of fire hazard at a protest, it's a good idea to think of that ahead. Right. And don't wear anything too baggy, because people can grab hold of it. And for the women in the audience, don't wear anything too tight, because you'll attract attention of a different sort from the male folk in the audience, and that's possibly even more dangerous sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes that does happen. But I would avoid journalistic logos, particularly with newsrooms. Not all the time, but in the current context, you need to think about it intentionally in your risk assessment and say, is this going to help me? So we were with the newsroom yesterday, and they're very popular amongst pro-Palestinian protesters. And they were like, our logo has really helped us massively. But when we have got into trouble, it's with pro-Israeli protesters. But other newsrooms that I've spent the week with, who are more establishment legacy news organizations, their logos have not helped at all when they've been down in the campuses. So think through, if you have a logo attached to a newsroom or a sticker, or even like, you know, a National Geographic thing that you once had on your backpack, think through if that's going to help you or hinder you when you're on the ground. Everyone does this? Okay. What I wouldn't do is wear black and any sort of combat fatigues. Does anyone wear combat fatigues? Good. And what you're looking to do is try not to be too militaristic or look like the other side, and also be very conscious of like lanyards around your neck. So I know in certain places you have to wear your press pass around your neck. Okay, it's the law. But make sure it's on a lanyard that if you pull it, it breaks. Because we have had journalists who've been pulled to the ground by their lanyard or by their hair or something that allows someone to grab hold of them. And if you're in the wrong crowd and you land on the ground, I have had people who I work with who have been kicked and trampled on intentionally by the crowd once they land on the ground, because that's just the mood of the crowd, and people like to kick people when they're down. Right? Think of the worst boss you've ever had. He likes to kick you when you're down, or she likes to kick you when you're down. That's what you've got to treat the crowd like. Sorry, think. I'm hoping this is going to work. I don't know. Maybe we can start out with this. Start.
Yes.
Here we go. Sorry, I should just say before this starts, some of the video footage I use is quite graphic. It's got a lot of expletive language, so feel free to step out if you don't like this kind of thing. But this is from the campuses the other day, and I want you to watch. Stop this again. I want you to watch this camera. Okay, watch this guy with the blue backpack on it, and see what the police officer uses. There he goes. He's got shot. Watch this police officer's name. Okay, are you going to listen or just watch it again?
Wow, that is intense. And it didn't matter if that was a news person.
Okay, so
Wow.
that journalist did nothing wrong. What he's got on his backpack is a live view backpack, which he needs to transmit his footage from, right? But the police officer, I don't know if the police officer had any issue with him personally, but he just wanted to stop the crowd moving in a certain way, and he went to grab something, and he got hold of the back of the backpack and pulled him down, right? That journalist was then later arrested and taken away. But if that had been a member of the crowd and they don't like journalists, once you're on the ground, they'll start stamping on your head. So put your backpack on the front of your body, tuck your hair away if you've got long hair. Don't give people things to grab hold of, right, and fling you around with. It's not a dance party. Okay, so think about what you're going to wear intentionally. Think about who you look like. And this morning we were talking about identity versus profile. What you wear is your profile. People perceive you in a certain way from what you're wearing. And this lady on the left with the gloves, she's a member of Antifa. The chap in the middle is a Proud Boy, or some sort of militia, I can't remember if it's a Proud Boy. And obviously the lady on the right is a journalist. Apart from the press sign, there is very little that distinguishes them from each other. And one of the things that the police are saying is we do not know who is a journalist. Right? We are confused by who's out there in the audience, and there are a lot of people who claim to be journalists because they have the right to gather content as citizens, and the police are worried about it, right? And if you think about it, Antifa and the Black Bloc, they have their own newsletter, they have their own news content gathering process, right? Which is absolutely their right, but the police don't like it. And if you look like them, the police automatically think you're one of them, and they would rather think that way than start asking questions about which newsroom do you work for, are you a reputable journalist. They will just automatically say you are someone on the bad side. Okay? So what I have seen at the campus protests is there are a lot of student journalists who are wearing things like bright pink helmets, bike helmets, because that's what they're called, right? And I'm not saying that you should always do that, but at the student protests, when I've been watching the videos, I've been like, that person really sticks out. You can tell that they're not a member of some sort of militia. So again, think intentionally about your gear and what you look like in your profile, and before you walk out the door, just look in the mirror, don't look at your good looks, look at what your profile is, and think, is this going to get me into trouble? Okay? And if you wear, and the thing about what everyone's wearing is they're wearing eyewear. Okay? And one of the things for the journalist is if you wear dark eyewear, which a lot of us have, it's quite scary for people on the other side. They can't see your eyes, and they can't see your intentions, and they get very nervous about it. Even if they don't realize they're getting nervous about the fact they can't see your eyes. There's a gentleman wearing sunglasses in the audience, I'm already getting nervous. What do you think? He's giving me the eyeball or not? Okay? So, we do tell you to take this kind of gear, and we tell you to wear eyewear, but just see if you can get the most innocent type of eyewear that you can get a hold of. Okay, so all of us, when we deploy to high-risk situations or higher-risk situations, they're bad places. But if we are prepared, we can be in a good situation. And the first thing that we do in newsrooms is we teach people about standard operating procedure. So we will always say to them, look, work out how you're going to behave and communicate that to others. And before you start going down to protest, talk to other journalists and work out what good behavior is for that context. So we have reams and reams of pages about standard operating procedure, which I will run through quickly for you, because again, it's like teaching you to suck eggs. But the key thing that we find is communications. One of the things that needs to happen, and we talked about this a lot this morning, so forgive me for the people who were here this morning. But before you go on a story, you need to have a briefing with anyone else you're working with, or your commissioning editor. Or if you're going down there by yourself and you don't have, and you're just on a fishing expedition, and you're buddying up with someone else, we strongly recommend, we would say, have a briefing with them and work out what your red lines are. And by red lines, I don't mean like Biden and Obama red lines overseas, right? Where the red line keeps moving up and down. I mean red lines where you say, look, if this happens and the police start beating up protesters, that's my red line, I'm out. Right? And the other person might say, that's not my red line, I'm going to keep going, because that's the money shot that I want. Right? So be on the same page about what you're going to do with whoever you're working with. And then work out how you are going to communicate. So this is particularly relevant for if you have a commissioner or whatever, but work out your method of communicating. So are you using an application on your phone to communicate? Are you using Slack? Are you using WhatsApp? Have you created a WhatsApp group? Is there one member who's on Signal and everyone else is on WhatsApp? Streamline the way you speak to people when it comes to high-risk situations, because what happens is messages get lost, especially if you're working with other people in the office, for example, and you think you've communicated to one manager, and that manager hasn't been told the message because someone didn't pass it on, right? Or it's lost in a Slack chat. And the newsrooms I work with love Slack, and I hate Slack. So I tend not to monitor Slack, and I tend to monitor WhatsApp. And they are having loads of conversations in Slack, and then 2-3 hours later, I look at my Slack and I'm like, oh my god, I should be across all of this. But I'm not, because I just don't like using that application, right? So work out what the best method of communication is with people, and be on the same application. The other thing is, when you go to big crowd events, networks go down or are restricted. So things like WhatsApp, things like Signal, things like Slack, they require a big degree of 5G or 4G minimum. Sometimes they can get away with 3G. But if the network goes down, one of the last communication methods to go down is SMS. It's not as friendly because you can't create such big groups, but it will still operate at a much lower level because it's much older technology. So make sure you have that on your phone, and make sure it's not set to transmitting on the internet. Everyone happy? I've already talked about check-in procedures, so I don't have to beat that horse to death. But one of the things you need to do is think about raising the alarm. Let's just talk about if you're going to get arrested. So say you think you're going to be arrested, and we often receive phone calls from journalists saying, I'm going to get arrested, I know I'm going to get arrested. Think about who you're going to make that call to, right? Are they expecting your call? Or are they going to a dinner party while you're out on the front lines? And they don't take the call. Think about how you communicate your message, right? So I often have conversations with people in trouble, and they waffle on about stuff I don't need to know. And they're like, then this happened, then this man said this to me, then we went 3 steps that way. I'm like, I don't need to know that. I need to know where you are, what you're doing, and what the threat is, and where you're going to be in 10 minutes time, right? So think about what you're going to communicate, and streamline it and package it in a way that the person on the other end can actually use that information to help you. And experienced teams do this really well. They don't, right? It's called bottom line up front, bluff. They tell me exactly what I need to know straight away, and they don't mess around with things I don't need to know. But the key thing, so what I need to know generally is what's happening and where people are. So I use tracking apps. So when I've got people in the field, I will track them. And if your check-in is with your mom and dad or colleague or whoever, they should know where your geolocation is. But here's the thing: tracking is only of value when I can do something about it. So I need to have a response. Okay, so it doesn't bother me, or if I know you're in Brooklyn Park and you're in trouble, I need to know what I'm going to do about that. And I cannot wait for the moment that you phone me up to sit around thinking, yeah, that's happened. How am I going to help that person who's my responsibility? What am I going to do, right? Because I then sit around and I phone other people and I run around waving my hands in the air. So I need to pre-plan my response in advance, which means I need to have assets at my disposal. Because I want to send someone to go and get you, or send someone down there to look for you, or know who is around you, so that I can phone up another TV crew or another journalist or another photojournalist and say, what's happening to my person, right? That means I need to have a contact sheet. And that all comes back to the briefing. That is stuff we need to discuss at the briefing, and when we first get to the scene of the protest, you need to say, I'm with Bob. This is Bob's number, and you need to feed that back to me, and I need to share that with anyone else in my team who might take the phone call when you're in trouble. Okay? And I want lots of telephone numbers, depending on the level of risk. Because I want to have multiple plans in place, again, depending on levels of risk. If it's not that dangerous, if really the only worst thing that can happen to you is if you're arrested, I'm not that worried, because I can get you out. But I am worried if you're going to being hit in the head and bludgeoned by a police officer, or even worse if you're going to be attacked by someone from the crowd. And I am worried that they're going to drag you off and do something really bad to you away from the crowd. So again, that's all part of my risk assessment. I look who is protesting, who are the people who can hurt you, and then I say to the journalists when they're deploying, I want a long list of numbers if I think it's a bad situation. So this is all standard operating procedure that we in newsrooms put in place every single day when we have people working in high-risk locations. And I want to know where the medical extraction point is. Right? So that might be a hospital, or that might be a police medic who will assist you. And it's a really good idea to go talk to the police medics, identify who they are, and be like, hi, my name is Bob the journalist. This is what I'm doing. How are you? Would you like a bottle of water? If it's a hot day or something like that. And make a connection with them. They might tell you to get lost and say we're too busy to deal with you. But in a moment of need, they might actually say, we're going to help this person out. Because they're medics and they are trained to help anyone in need, right? So, but I want to know the name of the medic if you've got it. I want to know where they stand. And I want to know if you've got that detail. So again, you need to relay that back to me in the office or wherever your point of contact is. All make sense? Everyone's doing all of these things all the time? Again, it's all context-based, right? So it depends on the level of risk. But if you're doing something very dangerous and you are dealing with protesters who really hate your guts, then this is the kind of thing that you should have in place. And the other thing is when things happen to you, it's a good idea to share it with others and tell other people what's happened in your little community or in the press freedom tracker, because that's how we learn about improving our behavior. Sorry, this is death by PowerPoint, I'm afraid. Any questions? So, when you get down to the scene of the protest, it doesn't matter how urgent it is for you to fire. Okay? Which I know is an outrageous thing to say. Right? So, hopefully, if it's really urgent and your deadline, you've got to get the picture of Trump walking out of the building or whatever it is. Hopefully, you're with someone else. Right? Because what you need to do when you first get to a scene is spend 5, 10, 15 minutes just having a look around and planning various things. What if this happens? What will I do? The best producer I've ever worked with, no matter what kind of story we've covered, like a terrorist attack or a protest, or we're just going to a crowd situation like a concert or something. What he's always done is he's drawn on a piece of paper, he's drawn the rough shape of the location, and he said, this is exit 1, this is exit 2, this is exit 3, this is our rendezvous point if we get split up. We're all going to meet at Starbucks 2 blocks down. And I would go away and do my job much happier knowing that we had a plan in place. Okay? And it's not rocket science, it's really simple, but it takes the discipline to say, this is an exit route, this is another exit route, and think about, if the police put a line in here, are they going to block this exit route? Right? Or if there is a stampede, and stampedes are by far the most dangerous thing we face at protest, where are the crowds going to go? Do I want to be going with them, or do I want to be going in a different direction? Or is there a flight of stairs I can go up where I can let the crowd rush past me and I'll be safe? Or a doorway, or a shop, like a pharmacy or something, that I can just nip into and be safe, and let the hullabaloo pass me by. So these are important things to clock, and you might be doing it mentally without realizing it, but you need to do it intentionally and tell others about it if you're working with others. Right? Because when you get stressed and nervous, and
you've got blood rushing in your ears, you might forget what you thought you were going to do in advance. But if you write it down, you have a much greater chance of remembering it when things are going bad. Everyone happy?
Yes.
Oh, the most docile crowd I've ever had. Mostly people are throwing things at me by now. Okay, so, and a very important thing to do when you first get down to the scene of the location is identify troublemakers or orchestrators of a protest. And I'm going to come back to that later on, right? But it's like one of the most important things you can do. The other thing is, try and limit your time in the crowd, right? Which again is a ridiculous thing to say to a bunch of photojournalists. But if you spend, the longer time you spend in the middle of a crowd, the more at risk you are. So if you can, be intentional about when you decide to go in the crowd, say, I'm going to do this thing, I now need this photo, I'm going to go in there, take the photo, and then I'm going to step back to the side and stay close to my exit, right? Or, just try and go in and out, don't try and stay right in the middle. And if you're between police lines and the protesters, which is where the money shot is, quite frankly, you need to think about what you're doing. So photojournalists will say to me, look, I want the shot of the baton hitting the jaw and the tooth flying out, right? And I want the spit, in the air, and that's what I want. And I've got to be there for that, right? And I'm like, yes, you do. That is your job. But here's the thing. You need to be there the next day, and the next day, and the day after that, right? Because your job is to report the long haul, not just the one-off event. Okay? And if you get your money shot and then get hit in the head because you're just staying there needlessly, and then you end up in hospital with a massive medical bill, you are not doing your job. Okay? And if you come back with trauma and you can't function as a photojournalist, you are not doing your job. And I work with many, many people who are in that position. And they often say to me, they don't always say it, but they often say, God, I wish I'd never done that thing that day. Because you can't take it back once it's happened. So just think through how important the money shot is of the tooth flying. By the way, I'm yet to see that picture, but when I get it, I'm going to pat that journalist on the back. And the other thing to think about is, the other thing to think about is your mental cognitive overload. Right? This is called switch tasking. So what we see with journalists, and everyone, not just journalists, right? You've got to understand how your brain works. So when our brain is like we were cavemen. It's the same brain that we had when we were cavemen, just slightly bigger, right? But it works in the same way. So what happens is we think about threat all the time. And we actually scan the horizon for threat, I think every 3 times a second or something like that, right? And because we are built to survive as a species. But the problem is, if you only think about threat, you would never get off your butt as a caveman and leave your cave to go hunt a deer, and our species would be over. So the brain has come up with a very clever way of rewarding actions like going out to seek energy, i.e. food, with dopamine. And it basically says to the caveman, you're thinking about a deer, and the caveman gets a little dopamine hit. And he goes, I'm going to get up and eat this, I'm going to go out and chase down this deer and bludgeon it to death and then eat it. Right? And the moment the cave person bludgeons the deer to death, they get a massive overload of dopamine, and when they're eating, they get even more. It's a reward system, right? Unfortunately, this is the same for journalists, right? You're thinking about police lines, you're thinking about safety, you're thinking about all these things that I've told you, and you're like, yes, I'm very conscious of safety, and then you think, I've got to get that money shot. That commissioner is going to give me a massive, pay rise if I get it. You get a little dopamine hit. And your brain deliberately is pushing you into a risk versus reward situation, and the reward is greater, the dopamine hit is greater from the potential reward, right? Because that is how we are built to work. And what happens is, over long periods of hours, our brain is constantly assessing risk, and it's going, everything is fine, everything is fine, everything is fine. Because it does not want you to start thinking about risk, because then you will not get the dopamine hit when you take your money shot. So your brain is actually working against you when you are down at a protest or anything dangerous. And we've got a one-word phrase for this, which is complacency. But when I say complacency, people go, "Oh, I'm never complacent." You know? So you have to understand that our very own physiology is working against us when it comes to safety. So, and your brain doesn't like to expend energy, so it tries to stop you thinking about safety. Right? Because that's an unnecessary energy consumption if you have already convinced yourself that you're safe. So be conscious of that and constantly look for combat indicators of what's coming and react intentionally to them. And sorry, before I hand over to her, the other thing to think about is transport to and from the protest. So it's not such a big deal. Sorry, you guys are not in? Yeah, okay. It's not such a big deal potentially in New York, right? But during Black Lives Matter, what we saw a lot of is people went down to a protest, and they were fine when they went down there. But in the middle of the night, when the march ended, they often ended up in a random part of town that wasn't such a nice part of town. And they had to walk out, because they couldn't catch an Uber or a Lyft or anything like that. And they would get mobbed, because they had lots of nice fancy equipment on them. And so we had quite a few incidents like that, which are concerning and dangerous. So think about how you're going to exit a protest, and if it's safe. And if you ride a bike down to a protest, make sure it's a long way, it's parked a long way away from the actual protest. Because when you're on a bike, it's very vulnerable. Right? And I have had journalists who've been attacked on their bikes just because they've been riding past some protesters who think it's very funny to just push them down. And if they're going at speed, it's quite a bad injury. So think about how you get to and from protests. But your red flag should always be, if you're working alone, which most of you will be, so buddy up with someone. If you're working after dark, right, and if alcohol and drugs are being consumed. Hopefully not by you, hopefully by members of the audience, but those are the three things to think about. And if those are happening, you need to think much more intentionally about safety, and goes into the sort of higher risk of operation. Let's be done, okay?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to Ella now. I've obviously bludgeoned you to death with words.
Thank you, Colin. So mostly when people think about risk, they're thinking about physical risk. Anyone here thinking about digital risk at all? Put your hand up if you are concerned about digital safety. And I'll talk a bit about what that means in a minute. I can see some people who really doesn't think about it at all. Feel free to put your hand up. I won't judge you. Nobody will judge you. One person's being honest. Right? Thank you. So why is digital safety important? It's increasingly important because journalists carry a lot of information around with them. That information is not only about them, it's information also about sources, but it's also personal information about their families. You are freelancers and you are carrying your own personal devices with you, which often have a mix of both work and personal, which puts you even more at risk. And increasingly, people are interested in your information in order to either obtain information, extra information about you, which they can use to harass and intimidate both you and your family members. But also so they can gain information about sources, for example, that you're in contact with. So this session today is in two parts. The first part is preparation. Colin's done the physical safety bit. I'm now going to talk through best practice when it comes to digital security, and it is all about the preparation. If you are on the ground and something happens, so if you're already at a protest and you're detained and your phone is searched and you haven't taken any steps to secure that information, it is too late. Sorry to be doom and gloom here, but it's all about the preparation. Please do not be the journalist that calls me from the airport if you're traveling going, Ella, I'm trying to set up security for my account. I need to do it now. My flight leaves in half an hour. Please don't do that. So it's all about preparation when it comes to digital safety. The more you can do in advance, the safer you will be and the safer your sources will be as well, okay? And it does take a bit of time. So when it comes to digital security, it's not about doing everything once. Let's say you set aside a whole Sunday and you spend a whole Sunday doing all your digital security, you forget about it, you never think about it again, and then you try and log into your account and you realize you can't remember your password that you created. Digital safety is about doing digital security best practice every day for the rest of your life. You just have to build it into your daily routine, and it is much better to spend 10 minutes a week sorting out some digital security issues than it is to spend a whole day trying to work on it. At this point, journalists go to me, oh, I've got so much to do, how can I work on my digital security? And then my answer to you is very simple. Please sign up to a major outlet tech section and receive digital security and digital and tech information to your email. They often do newsletters once a week, so you can just stay up to date on who's been hacked, what person has bought what company. This is all really important for you when it comes to general digital security knowledge. Today I'm here to talk to you about protecting your digital safety when it comes to covering crowd events, protests, demonstrations, anything related to the election. And as I mentioned, it's all about preparation. So so we talked about risk assessments. Who here has actually done a risk assessment? Put your hand up. Anyone? 1, 2, 3. But yes, people who work with me, I know you've done risk assessments. Okay, so we've got like 3 people. Risk assessments, for people who don't know, are basically a document with a bunch of questions which help you think through not only what the risk is, but how to reduce that risk so that you are as safe as you can be. And Colin mentioned a lot of content here that you would think through when you are doing a risk assessment. So the people who did a risk assessment, Put your hand up. I saw some people. Yeah. Was that a physical risk assessment, or was there any digital risk assessment? There was? Amazing. That often doesn't happen. When it comes to risk, you need to be thinking about digital as part of your risk assessment. Because if you go down to a protest and you're beaten up, that's a physical security incident. But if your phone is taken, that's a digital safety issue, and the two are interlinked. So please, when you're thinking about your safety, you need to think of it, and they talked about it this morning in the session about holistic safety, and that includes digital. So the first thing you need to think about is your own digital risk, and everybody's digital risk is different, and the reason for this is that you are people interacting with technology on a daily basis, and that includes the internet, but it also includes devices, and you will have a greater or lower risk depending on various things, which I will talk about in a minute. But you are also journalists, and that brings with it an extra layer of risk that you need to think about. And the things you need to think about are the following. So if you're a person just going about your daily business as a citizen, you have items that you need to think about that increase or decrease your risk. And the first one is what's called your online profile. This is the amount of data that is available about you online. Now, the bad news is that you live, probably you live here in the United States, and it has some of the worst data privacy laws I have seen of any country. There is a lot of data available about you on the internet generally. And this puts you at risk. It puts you at risk of criminals. This is what we call adversaries. They could target you for identity theft. They could hack into your accounts and take it over with Bitcoin promotion. Journalists may ask me, Ella, why do I care about this? If you are unable to access your social media because it's been hacked by a Bitcoin promoter, then you are unable to promote your own work, for example. And that can be, I often speak to journalists whose social media has been hijacked by criminal behavior. Not related to their journalism, but it is impeding their work, or it's causing them some form of reputational damage. You have digital habits. What do I mean by that? So some of you will like technology, and you will stay up to date with tech news. Some of you may be using the latest iPhone. Some of you may be using a really old phone from 10 years ago, whatever it is. This will increase or decrease your risk. Why? Because generally the more up-to-date your technology, the safer you are, and that is because when you update your operating systems on your computers, your phones, it is fixing bugs in the code, and those bugs are what hackers take advantage of to insert malware and things like spyware onto your devices. Others around you can be a big problem. So you may take all the steps possible to secure your data, but maybe you have, I don't know, a niece, for example, who really loves to post stuff on Instagram, and she has posted a bunch of photos of your home all over the internet. Maybe you have a father-in-law who opened a Facebook account 10 years ago and posted a bunch of pictures of your children on there, and has not taken steps to secure those accounts. That is data that is leaking out there about you. And it's not about your journalism, but it helps build up a picture of who you are, where you live, what your daily routine is. And you also may post a lot of information about yourself. So when I started doing this job about 8-9 years ago, journalists were posting a lot of personal content about themselves on the internet. And it wasn't their fault. They were being told to build their brand and connect to their audiences, and they overshared information. And I'll talk more about that when I come to talking about online harassment. And that data is now being used, it's being weaponized, I don't use that word lightly, to target journalists in order to basically drive them offline. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. I've talked about adversaries, that's kind of general criminals. So that's you as a general citizen going about your daily digital life, but you are also journalists. And that brings with it another layer of risk, an extra layer of risk. Why? Because maybe you're very public facing, you need to have an internet presence in order to promote your works, especially true if you are a freelancer. And the types of stories you do, or the beat that you cover, can bring with it more or less digital risk. And that really depends on what I will call the adversaries, who is interested in you because of the work that you do, and how much tech capacity do they have? Is it a government? If it is, bad news, because they have a lot of tech capacity, a lot of money, and a lot of legal power, and they are the most powerful adversary that you can face. Is it a group that really likes to hack? So there are online groups that really like to hack, that does the story that you're covering, is it going to annoy them basically? Are they going to hack you in retaliation? You are in contact with sources, and you need to communicate with them. And this will put you more or less at risk depending on the tool that you use to communicate to them with. And I'll talk more about that as well. So all of this is what we call your risk assessment. We have a nice risk assessment that you can use at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Our resources are available outside on a QR code. There's a risk assessment here that is split into two parts. A risk assessment for you as a digital citizen and a risk assessment for you as a journalist. And I would really strongly encourage you to please complete this risk assessment. Go through the questions and really think, how vulnerable am I? And you are in an election year, and depending on who wins this election, there may be more or less digital risk. Under the last Trump administration, I was very, very busy with online harassment cases. I have never seen so much online abuse in the United States during that time. It has died down, and I expect it to pick up now as we go into the election more closely. And depending on the outcome, I would expect it also to peak then as well. So the more you can do in advance to protect yourself, the better you are. So I'll come to online harassment in a minute, but I'm going to talk about phones, because phones are important. You all have phones, you all use them for work. I've got one like pointing right at me as I'm speaking. It's a little unnerving, I've got to be honest. So quite often they're your personal phones. Can I just get, so who here is using their personal phone for work-related content? Just put your hand up, there we go, okay. Does anyone have a separate phone that you use for anything else? I've got two. Could you let me know when you use this other phone?
Usually the big group events, so like the protest and
Great. Okay, so here we have someone who's really into security and has a separate phone that he takes down to cover protests or big events. And the reasons for that, I will talk about in a minute. So, do you need a separate phone to cover these events? And that really depends on your risk. Are you going to be detained? Have you already been detained? So if you have a risk profile that involves you previously been harassed or detained, then the risk is much higher for you. Okay. Do you fit the profile of someone who's likely to be detained? Is another one we need to think about. So do you need a separate phone? It doesn't have to be expensive. Okay, you don't have to get the latest iPhone to go down to cover a protest or event. But a separate phone can make your life easier. Why? Because if you get detained and someone searches that phone, or someone steals that phone, or someone breaks that phone, you are not going to lose your content for a start, but also people are not going to gain access to every area of your life. Your phone has a lot of information on it, so just think about all the data on your phone. It is quite frightening to think about. You have contacts in there, you have financial information, you have your location history. You go into Google, or Apple, it's been tracking you for your whole time you've been carrying your phone. So think about whether you need a separate phone. Some of you may, some of you may not, some of the cost might be an issue, but please be aware that you are very vulnerable with your phone for the various issues that I'm going to talk about now. So if you decide to take your personal phone with you, or you don't have a separate phone, please make sure you back up the information on your device. So a lot of people are pretty good at that. Journalists are very good at it generally. And please know what content is on your devices. Now, I have spoken to journalists who have been detained and they have had their devices searched. It's not in the US, and they have had documents on there that have made them look in some way suspicious to the group that has detained them. And they just had documents on their device because they were doing a research story in the army, for example. But the group that detained them and searched their computer found these documents on the army, and the guy had a shaved head, he looked like he could be in the army, and this group were not pleased. And they were very concerned. Yes?
This is definitely something we have to worry about police here, right? It's fairly protected. You're talking more of protesters who are taking the vehicle or something.
Not necessarily, and I'll come to that when I talk about biometrics. So I know that you are protected by the Fourth Amendment, yes, but in the case of biometrics, it's not always as clear cut. So my advice is that you carry as little as possible on your phone, and just know what is on your phone. And it may be, yes, that your phone is taken by a protester, and if you have biometrics turned on, they're going to put your phone right up to your face and unlock your phone that way. Or they're going to put your thumb on the phone and unlock it that way as well. Someone talking? Yes? No? So the next thing you need to think about, this is just general best practice for phones. Please regularly update your phone. You get those little reminders. If you update it, it will be safer because it will be fixing bugs that I mentioned about earlier. You want to be turning on what's called full disk encryption for your devices, for your phones. If you have an iPhone, this is already turned on for you. If you have an Android, this is running on a Google operating system, you will have to turn that on yourself. You can do that in the settings section. Why is it important to turn on full disk encryption? Because it will encrypt the information on your phone. And what that means is that it will be protected. You have to create a password for it, and that information will be more. Of course, they can always ask you for the password. You could not give them the password, they may arrest you. And I'm talking here also about crossing borders. If any of you are thinking of traveling, I don't know if any of you cross borders regularly, but turning on full disk encryption is a very good idea. Think about the data that you have stored in your messaging apps. Now, I get journalists who say to me all the time, oh, that's great, I'm using encrypted messaging app, I'm using iMessage, I'm using WhatsApp, I'm using Signal, it's great. I'm just, okay, but what happens if your phone is taken? What are you doing with all the content that is stored in those messaging apps? You need a plan for basically making a copy, backing up, and deleting content from your messaging apps on a regular basis if you are in contact with people who may be sensitive sources, okay? I'm giving you here the best practice. So some of this may not be relevant for you. that's why I talk about personal risk and understanding your individual risk, okay? So some of this may not be useful for you. And I'll talk about SMS in a minute because Colin mentioned that. Please think about your contacts. You have a lot of contacts on your phone. They're stored in many different places. They're stored on the device itself, on the SIM card. They are stored in your Apple contacts or Google contacts. So the same contact, and in messaging apps, so the same contact can be stored 3 or 4 times. Do you have anybody in your phone who could be classed as doing something illegal, for example? Are you doing a report on, I don't know, drug running, for example, and you have drug dealers in your phone? If this is your personal phone, how are you going to show a work separation? This is often an issue that journalists come up against if they're using their personal phone for work and they're in contact with people who may be doing something that could be potentially illegal. So really think about that. Please log out of any unused apps. So don't have apps running on your phone. The more apps you have, the more data they collect and the more information they give away about your location, and I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. So really limit, just think like, do I need all these apps on my phone? I don't need this one. Don't just remove it from the home screen, actually uninstall it, because apps are collecting data, and that data can be used to build up a profile of you, and law enforcement do request that data, and I'll talk more about that right now. Location tracking. So quite often advice about going down to protests with your phone is to turn off location tracking for apps. So location tracking is really helpful, right? You can use maps and find out where you are. You can call an Uber if you need to. But location tracking is obviously tracking your location. That's its job. Please be aware that if you turn it off, these services won't work. Please also be aware that even if you do turn it off, it's not going to protect you 100% from people finding out your location. In fact, it won't at all. For some parts, yes, but for the majority of it, no. Please, this sounds pretty obvious. Please secure your phone with pin lock or with biometrics. Please don't use the swipe, okay? Because the swipe leaves a greasy mark on your phone, and if you hold your phone up to the light, you'll be able to see how to access the phone, and people can gain access. Also be mindful that people around you are looking at how you open your phone, okay? And that could prove useful information for them if they want to gain access to it. So if you have biometrics turned on, a lot of journalists find biometrics, such as the thumb or the face, really helpful, especially in protests. They need quick access to their phone, but please be aware of some of the limitations of that. This is a case, it's not of a journalist, it's actually of a criminal, but his phone was unlocked by the police who used, they forced him, basically, a suspect, to unlock his phone using his thumb, which is not supposedly what you're allowed to do here, and they gained access to his phone that way. So biometrics, as a general rule, are very useful if you're in your home, if it's an environment that you feel secure in. They are very useful at a protest if you need quick access to your device, but they can put your information at risk, and that is because people can just take your thumb and stick it on your phone and open it up. Please never cross a border. Like, don't fly, do not cross any border with biometrics turned on. The laws are very grey about biometrics, and there is not, it's a very new thing, relatively speaking, in terms of legal support globally. So where possible, a PIN number is preferable. The longer the PIN number, the more secure, and that's just mathematically how it works. So if you have biometrics turned on, you can deactivate it by what's called the lockdown mode. So both Apple and Android offer this. It's normally you double click your volume button and it will turn off biometrics. Some of you may be using that already, and I really recommend you look into doing that if you have it turned on. So it comes with pros and cons, okay? So just be aware of that. And I think my job is to make you think of the worst case scenario. So if someone gains access to your phone, what is the worst case scenario for you there, okay? And that is both here in the US, but if you are traveling doing stories, then really think about when you cross a border what you're carrying with you on your phone. Now, you need to understand what your phone is. Your phone is a computer, basically, and the job of your phone is to talk to anything near it in order to gain information about your location and transmit that to other points that are collecting this data. So your phone is always connecting to phone towers, and that is how you receive your phone signal. This gives an approximate geolocation. Your phone connects to Wi-Fi, and that is how you connect to the internet when you're in a coffee shop or you're walking around and your phone's just like, I am here, and the Wi-Fi says, would you like to connect? And your phone says, yes please. Bluetooth, it's also connecting to Bluetooth. It's always, yesterday at the airport, for example, I was standing in the queue just using my phone, and I got a pop-up saying, would you like to connect to somebody's watch? Just like right next to me. I was like, oh, this is not good. So your phone is always transmitting information about you. Is this risky for you? And that really depends on your profile, okay? It may not be a problem for you, and if that's the case, that's great, but it could be. Obviously your phone is giving away GPS location, and that's a much wider range. So basically your phone's job is to locate you and tell others where you are at all times. That's the job of your phone. So please don't be surprised when people can locate you via your phone. That is its job. Am I saying never use your phone? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, please think about, is this a risk for you? And it may not be a risk for you covering a protest this time, but it might be further down the line if maybe you have taken some photos that are maybe of interest to law enforcement, for example, and they have a legal subpoena for your data. Please be aware that your cell phone company collects this data and can legally pass it to governments. They also collect normal cell phone through the cell phone company, call logs, but also SMS messages are not encrypted. So please bear in mind when it comes to communications. Colin mentioned SMS. If you are using SMS, please do not use it for anything sensitive, okay? And the reason for that is it's not encrypted and is often legally requested, and it is often handed over, okay? So, okay. So I'm going to talk about secure communications. So who here, what are you using when you're communicating with people? Either in the field or like other colleagues or sources? Anyone here using WhatsApp? Okay. Anyone here using Signal? Okay. Anyone here using iMessage? Anyone here using Instagram message? Anyone here using Slack? Yes, so anyone here using Zoom? Okay. So anyone here using normal phone calls? Okay. A normal phone call is fine if what you are discussing is public information and you do not mind anyone else hearing that information. So basically, if you are happy to go into the street and discuss it with the person next to you, then please feel free to use a normal cell phone. And it may be that you need to call, I don't know, a government official to have a long quick record. Perfectly fine to use a normal phone call for that. It may be that you're calling your mother to eat for lunch on Sunday and you don't care that people know about that. Great, use a normal phone call. But anything else that you are concerned about or you don't want people knowing, what you need to be using is what's called end-to-end encryption, and this gets talked about a lot. What does this mean? End-to-end encryption means all the information you send is encrypted, so cannot be intercepted, in transmission, and it's encrypted on the server of the company. And that is very important because some things are encrypted in transmission. Zoom, for example, before COVID, was encrypted in transmission, but not on the server. So what does this mean? That conversation that you were having that you thought was all nice and secure is sitting on their server and is not in encrypted form and can be legally requested by law enforcement, or could be hacked, or could be accessed by people at the company. And we have had cases in the US where employees of the companies have been gaining information about Saudi dissidents, for example, or they interrupt Zoom calls of people who are discussing issues around China because they're actually located in the country itself. So please be mindful when it comes to encrypted communications. What you need to be thinking is, who am I talking to? What am I talking to them about? And how at risk are they, and how at risk am I? So if you are already under surveillance, if you have received a government subpoena, then you are probably more at risk. If they are doing something illegal and they may be under government watch, for example, or they have been seen to be a problem for the government, I use the government a lot, but it could be because they legally request data, then please think carefully about what you are using. So you can use end-to-end encrypted, like messaging apps. For example, a good example of this is WhatsApp. Another good example is Signal, and iMessage now is encrypted. The encryption for WhatsApp is the same as Signal. Signal built the encryption for WhatsApp, so a lot of people have concerns about WhatsApp, and they ask me, oh, is it safe? I get asked this a lot. How safe is WhatsApp? And I tell them it depends on your risk profile, which is what I talked a lot about today. Okay? The encryption for WhatsApp is as secure as the encryption for Signal. But WhatsApp is owned by Meta, and the clue is in the name, Meta. So some apps and companies are collecting what's called metadata. Now this is not the content of your messages. This is all the information around it. How, when you were last online, who you called, how long you spoke for. All of this can be used to build up a profile of who you are in contact with and for how long. Is it a problem for you? Really depends on your risk profile. You will know better than me if that's a problem for you. And sometimes it may be, and sometimes it might not be. That will really dictate to you about the type of service you should use. Now, I will say it's really important to stay up to date on who owns these services, what they are doing with your data, how do they keep your data, is it in encrypted form, and have they ever been hacked? Has your data ever been breached there? And what did they do about it? Because in digital security, nothing stays the same forever, and I think Elon Musk's buyout of Twitter is a very good, now X, a very good example of this. I had journalists who built their entire career on Twitter, and now, you know, they're having not the greatest experience on it. So it's a really bad idea to be reliant on just one online tool. So it's a good idea to have a variety of them in your toolbox. Colin mentioned when you go down to protests, quite often the service can be blocked, and it may be that you have two phones with two different phone companies. So just in case the Signal, for example, one, you have access with another one, that could be an option. It really depends if that happens quite often, whether you want to be kind of making that cost, or if you're going down with another fellow journalist, just finding out what phone solve service they use, and it's a good idea if you have different ones to cover your bases. Please be aware that anything you do by Slack is not encrypted. Twitter DMs are not encrypted. Please be very mindful. In some circumstances, you have to turn the encryption on for certain circumstances. They're not by default. So WhatsApp and Signal are by default. Some of them you may have to turn on. So this is metadata for WhatsApp there on your left. This is for business accounts. So if you have a WhatsApp business account, it's leaking a lot more data. The other one is Signal, and they only have your contact information, and probably the government has that information already anyway. Yes? Yeah, so it's end-to-end encrypted. Yeah, it is end-to-end encrypted now, yeah. They have rolled that out, and Instagram also now, in some places it's rolled out, and I think in some it's still continuing to be rolled out. So that information in your Facebook is only as secure as the password you use to secure your Facebook account, okay? So if your password is 1234, I have bad news for you, that is not secure, okay? So you want to be thinking about your passwords. Make sure your passwords are long, and by long I mean 15 characters or more. The longer it is, mathematically, the more difficult it is to hack. It is not a guy in a hoodie trying to guess your password these days. It is a complex computer algorithm. So mathematically, it's more difficult the longer it is, okay? So I'm not going to talk about account security today, but we do have a lot of resources. I encourage you to scan the QR code outside in order to find out information about that. If you are dealing with sensitive information I cannot stress enough the importance of using good passwords for encryption and also for your accounts because hacking happens and if you are covering stories where hacking happens a lot, certain regions of the world really like to hack, that could be an issue for you. How are you with time? Do you have okay, we're wrapping up. Securing your footage, this is a big problem for you because you have, anyone here do video as well as photo? Anyone? Yeah. This is a big problem and I'm afraid I don't have an easy answer for you because your files are very heavy and it's a real problem trying to secure those, especially if you're in the field with low internet bandwidth, for example. You need a plan for how you're going to secure your footage before you go out to cover, but also when you get back home, because we have seen that maybe law enforcement turn up. We have cases of journalists who've gotten back home, and a week later the law enforcement have turned up to seize their equipment. Please encrypt your equipment. Please regularly back up your information and encrypt it. That goes. Normally journalists are pretty good at backing up information, but you really need to be thinking about encryption. Please don't try and encrypt it as the police are banging down your door. You need to spend time thinking about this in advance. It does take time and can be a little fiddly at times, so you need to dedicate some time to learning about how that works. I would really recommend moving information off onto an external hard drive. You probably do this already. Please encrypt that hard drive. Please have more than one copy, and please keep it in more than one place. So please keep it all, please keep it in different places, because if you've got one in your home and that's the only one you have, and the police come and take it, that's it. So it's good to have another copy that you keep somewhere that doesn't look suspicious. I don't know, like not your parents' house probably, but a trusted friend or colleague maybe. Think about encrypted file containers. So this is encrypting information, not the whole computer, for example, but you're encrypting a file within it. That could be helpful for some people. Please plan for the worst case scenario. You don't have to encrypt everything, but are there photos or footage that you really need to keep encrypted? And really think about when you will do that, okay? There is no camera that encrypts information for you, I'm afraid. That has not been designed. There were rumors about one appearing about 5 years ago. It has yet to appear. So watch this space. I'm not overly hopeful about that. Any questions so far? I'm talking a lot. Yes?
Thank you so much. This information is so helpful. I had a question. Your thoughts, and very briefly, on VPNs. Do you encourage them? Were there any issues that you see journalists and photojournalists run into using them? I know traveling abroad is a different situation. Like in China, for example, it was like I was so afraid of what was going on, I just opted to not use anything. Yeah. But any kind of recommendations?
Yeah. So the question is about VPNs. This is a virtual private network. Most of you will be familiar with VPNs because you want to access Netflix from a different country and watch cooler content. But VPNs are very helpful for other things like accessing information online that may be blocked, or if you want to keep your browsing history secret from your internet service provider. So when you are connected to the internet, your computer gives your device a special number called the Internet Protocol address, the IP address. That IP address tells people that you are connected to the internet from that device, and that information gives away information about you, including the make and model of your device and approximate location. Your internet service provider collects your browsing history. Is that a problem for you? Maybe, because law enforcement may subpoena for that, and it really depends about what you're looking up on the internet. Having a VPN, what it does is it changes your IP address. So instead of connecting from the US, you can connect from Canada, what your internet service provider sees is that you are connected to a VPN. So a VPN is really good if you are wanting to conceal your browsing history from your internet service provider, providing that doesn't make you look suspicious. In some cases, in some countries it does. A VPN can be useful if you want to use public Wi-Fi and you don't want people to know what you're doing on the internet. So when you connect to public Wi-Fi, people can see that you are connected to your Facebook, for example. I say people, I mean hackers with special equipment, not just general public. They can see you're connected to your Facebook, but they can't see what you're looking at on your Facebook page, okay? Because your Facebook page is encrypted. So the websites that you visit, often now, well, most of them are encrypted. You will see that because it says HTTPS at the beginning, and you see that little padlock. Great, that means all the information on that page is encrypted. Nobody can look at it unless they're standing behind you or you have spyware on your device. So what a VPN does is that people who are, if you're on public Wi-Fi, people will see you're connected to a VPN, they won't be able to see that you're using Facebook. So in those circumstances, it can be useful. In some countries, it's illegal to use VPN, so please know the law before you use your VPN. In some countries, you can only use government-sponsored VPNs, and that is basically not a VPN at all, because they pass that data to the government. So please read up about that before you go. You can just do a bit of a Google search. It's increasingly common that there are crackdowns now on VPNs, and that is because governments do not like that people look at content that they are trying to block, basically. Please be aware when you choose a VPN that you do your research on your VPN, because it's very weird. In the digital world, people just sign up for stuff without looking at who owns it and what they're doing with your data. In the physical world, if you want to buy a car, you look at the make and model and the safety record and how expensive it is, and you do a bit of research. For online services, people don't do this. So a lot of VPNs are actually not very secure. They are keeping your data and they are selling it, or they are giving it to governments. So please generally always pay for a VPN. If it's a proper service, you get it better. And look for a VPN that does not track your browsing history. Okay? Does that answer your question on VPNs? Tunnelware is a good one. It depends on where you're going. So Tunnelware is a good one that works well here in the US. Siphon is also a pretty good one. And it depends on different countries have different VPNs that are better and work in those circumstances. Just to finish up now, I'm going to talk about online data and how to secure it. So it's an election year. We saw a lot of attacks on journalists during the last election cycle, and also during the Trump administration. We saw a lot of attacks on journalists where their personal data was used to harass them. And by personal data, I mean things like their home address or their pictures of their family. And it is a real issue. So online harassment globally is a big problem. I see it as a threat to democracy, and I do not say this lightly. It is not the same as it was when I first started out in this job 8 years ago. It was just kind of your average troll harassing people online. Now it is a very well orchestrated campaigns directed against journalists and others in society, like lawyers or human rights defenders, and also media outlets. And the idea behind it is to change the conversation online around particular topics. Okay, so obviously during COVID epidemic, what we saw was a lot of health journalists who had previously not been on anyone's radar, or already were all of a sudden being targeted by conspiracy theorists online, for example. We saw a lot of doxing and assault and death threats online against US journalists who are covering maybe alt-right, for example, in the US. And this is one of my, I would hesitate to use the word favorite because it's never nice to describe this, but there are certain fans of musicians online who are very aggressive. This is the case of a Pitchfork editor who wrote a review of a Taylor Swift album and gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and in return, Taylor Swift fans found out her address and threatened to burn her house down. So what my example of this is, it doesn't matter the beat you cover, you can still be at risk. And what I often, well not what I often see, but what I have heard is that if you're a photojournalist on the ground, what we see now is people are recording you doing your job. And then later they use that footage, they put it online, they massively circulate it as a way to harass and intimidate you, and they may link you to a particular group or a political party as a way to try and discredit your work. What can you do? Please, best practice for protecting online data. Please understand your risk and the threat. So as I mentioned before, everybody's risk is different. Do you have a lot of personal data about you online? I'm not saying don't put information about yourself online. What I'm saying is think carefully about that information. And ideally, if I were to look you up online, I would only find professional information. Where you work, the type of stories you do, professional contact details. I should not be finding photos of your family, where you went on holiday last year, your dog's name, your favorite coffee shop. All of that information ideally should be kept online. Please Google yourself and other search engines. Google will give you results, but Firefox will give you different ones. Please use advanced search methods for this. Those are what's called Google dorking or Boolean search methods. You can look them up. If you scan our resources, we tell you about those. And this gives you more accurate results. You can use reverse image search to see where photos of yourself appear on the internet and the original location of that photo. You can sign up to a Google alert. So Google Alerts alert you if your name appears somewhere on the internet. So you can just sign up to a Google alert and sign up and put your name in there, your address, your date of birth. And if that appears somewhere on Google, they will send you an email going, hey, your name appeared here. And then you can go there and check it out. Please secure your online accounts. We have resources for that, so I won't talk too much about it. Please turn on two-factor authentication or use passkeys. Please have good passwords. Think about your social media settings. A lot of personal data about journalists comes from their own social media accounts. You have an Instagram account. I bet you started off that Instagram account a long time ago, and it was a personal Instagram account. And maybe if you scroll back through time to the beginnings of Instagram, you will find there personal photos of your family, maybe, or a picture of you celebrating your birthday. Please delete that content. Please decide if your social media is for work or for personal. Do not mix them. In the case of Facebook, so I know that people use it to reach out to sources, especially if they're covering breaking news. Please look at your privacy settings. Please sign up to have your data removed from a data broker removal site. So you will be familiar with sites such as people.com or white pages. You're familiar with these. It gives away your home address. You might use it to look up sources, but they use it to look you up too. And there are services in the US which will remove you from these databases. Okay. The most common one is A-Bind Delete Me. And that I cannot. If you do only one thing, I would do this. It costs about the price of a streaming subscription a month. It is forever, I'm afraid, but that is the price for data privacy laws, I'm afraid. So if you do that, it won't remove the most ardent of harassers, but it will remove the majority. They will not be able to find your information so easily. If you live with someone, you have a partner, please get them to sign up too. Please speak with family and friends about what you're happy sharing online in terms of your personal data. And please plan for the worst case scenario. What happens if your home address is posted on the internet? What happens if your cell phone number is posted on the internet and circulated? Do you have another phone to use? And that can be really important. Yes?
If you search yourself, like make sure that your address is not there when you do one person you search, does that dig down to Google? That way
Yeah, so Google collects everything about you, because they give you a service for free. It's not free, they're collecting your data. So is that an issue for you? Really depends on your risk profile. So that's an issue if you're worried about a government subpoena. If not, maybe not such a risk for you. I mean, it's not nice, but that's a trade-off, right? So Google in general, so if you're using Gmail, etc., their services are secure. Like, it's very difficult to hack Google itself. Your account might not be secure because your password only 1234. But Google itself provides you with a secure, easy to use service. The trade-off, they collect your data. If that's a problem for you, that's difficult because there aren't that many services that you can use that don't collect your data, especially not for free. If you're worried about a government subpoena and you're doing something that could really annoy the US government, I would not be using any US-based companies for any of your online stuff. And that is very difficult because most online services are US-owned. And can be problematic. Just quickly before I finish, targeted attacks and online smear campaigns. So the guidance for harassment online is do not respond. Harassers do not want to have a conversation with you, they want to undermine your credibility, and there's a lot of tactics that they use to do this. I won't talk about those today. I can send you to some resources on it. You can search for them on our site. But targeted attacks and online smear campaigns are a different ballgame, and the reason for this is that I often speak to journalists who have been subjected to smear campaigns, and these are targeted, constant attacks against their reputation with the objective of driving them offline or undermining their reporting, and they have no response. They do not know what to do, they generally don't have the support of a media outlet, and they have no idea how to move forward. If this happens to you, you need to think about what is the objective of the people who are harassing you, and you need to think about whether you respond or not. Is it worth a response? And in some cases, journalists have told me I want to say something, and if that is the case, ideally you will have the support of a media outlet. You can post a statement to the top of your social media which outlines what is happening and what your response is and why it is, and leave it like that. Do not interact with individuals, you just post it there. And if anyone comes to you, you can just redirect them to it. I have resources that I can share with you on how to craft that statement. Be aware if you do that, it can bring more harassment. That's the trade-off. So, you know, it's a difficult, and ideally you would have the support of a media outlet, and there are a number of resources for media outlets that I can give you. And with that, I hand it to Colin. Sorry, Colin.
Sorry, we're looking through a lot.
Awesome.
Okay, so we talked about how to prepare before you go out into the field, and I've got 20 minutes to tell you what to do in the field. So put this here for a moment. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how the police carry out policing activities, and as I said, a number of journalists have got into trouble by not understanding what the police are actually doing. And often the police are doing legitimate things, but just the police fall foul of, or journalists fall foul of what they're doing. So first I'm going to tell you what they use. So when police are carrying out a crowd control situation, what they are doing is they're allowing people to protest, which is their legitimate right, and then there will be a time when they say, right, we now need to clear the protesters. Okay? And first I'm going to tell you how they do it, then I'll tell you why they do it in the certain way that they do it. So how they do it is they use certain weapons, non-lethal weapons, like an LRAD, which is a long-range acoustic device, which is this circular thing on top of the police car. That is actually a sound weapon, and if directed at the right range, it can actually burst your eardrums. But they don't tend to use it very often. We saw them used a lot in Portland, but not in other locations, right? It's quite a dangerous thing to use. What they like to use more is tear gas. And the way they use tear gas is they either fire it from a gun like this, outside of a little tube, and one of these silver pellets will fly out, and it will land in the street, it will start fizzing, or they'll use the canister in the middle, which is a handheld canister. They pull the pin and throw it like a grenade, okay? And it fizzes out. What they are trying to do with this weapon is they're trying to get the crowd to disperse. So they will first use the LRAD, often to announce and say, we're carrying out a police action, we want you to leave. If you do not leave, they will use tear gas on you. Okay? And the way they're supposed to correctly use this is they're supposed to fire it using the wind to disperse it. So they fire it in front of the protesters, the wind blows it into the protesters, and they then use, and then they're given evacuation routes to get out from, right? The police are not supposed to use it where there is no evacuation route for the protesters, because that is very dangerous. So that's why it's very important for you, when you see tear gas about to be used, or you see police dressing up, putting on their respirators, that you clock your evacuation route straight away and say, that's the way I'm going to go. Okay? The key combat indicator is when they put on respirators. Police do not like to wear respirators. It stops their communication between each other, so they will only put them on when they're going to use tear gas or pepper spray. If you see them going on, you know they're going to use it, and you should react intentionally to that behavior. So what you should do when you are, if you're going to be exposed to tear gas, is you should have the right protective equipment, right? So ideally this would be a respirator. But the thing about a respirator is a respirator allows you to stay in place when you are being tear gassed. And the police are sending you a message. They're saying, we want you to disperse. So if you put on a respirator and stay where you are, they're going to come and send you another message, and that will be a much more aggressive message, and that's often a baton to the head. They want you to leave. So if you put on a respirator, it's because you need to leave that area and you want to do so safely. It's also important to wear head protective gear, because those pellets, when they fire out, if they hit you in the head, they cause damage. And wear eye protection. Lots of people you'll see wearing swimming goggles because they form a nice seal.
but I'll tell you why swimming goggles are not good for other reasons later on. But if tear gas is going to be used, swimming goggles are a good protection. There are given the time, there are lots of videos on our website about how to deal with tear gas. But the thing to do is basically, if you want tear gas, go find a windy spot where the wind is blowing, okay? And stand up, hold your arms out, and let the wind take the crystals off you, okay? Tear gas reacts to water and milk. So if you pour milk in your eyes, which often you see protesters doing, or water, it is not sufficient to take the tear gas. And actually what it does is it washes the tear gas that's in your hair, the crystals into your eyes, and it makes it worse. So you need copious amounts of water to take tear gas out, like a shower or a tap, which are not often available at protests. Okay? The other thing about using milk is milk curdles in hot weather. So tear gas scratches your eyes, and then if you pour curdled milk full of bacteria into your eyes, you get infections. So think carefully about the kind of things that you use to clear your eyes out. But the best thing to do is just stand in the wind, and then when you go home, have a shower, not have a bath, because you'll find yourself in a tear gas cloud in your bathroom. Okay? And if the irritation continues, definitely go see a doctor, because tear gas is an irritant. It can cause lots of skin issues long term. So again, there are lots of videos on our website that go into detail about this, so I'll just pass on quickly. The other thing that people use, or police use, as a crowd dispersal, so once they fire the tear gas, if people do not clear the area, they then use pepper balls fired from a gun like this, and it's got a hopper on the top. Okay, those guns sometimes look different, but they all have the hopper. And they fire these nice sort of cherry candy pellets out, and if they hit you, they put pepper spray in your eyes, and they can be used to fire paint, so they sometimes demarcate protesters, right? Orchestrators or troublemakers. And, or they use pepper spray like this, and the line moves up, they're starting to arrest someone, and the team leader will fire pepper spray at a protester in the face to deter other protesters from coming to fight with them. Does that all make sense? These are all non-lethal weapons, okay? But here's the thing. If they're used incorrectly or in the wrong range, they can cause a lot of damage. So if you get a pepper ball in the eye or a rubber bullet like this, you can be blinded. And that happened in the first protest of Black Lives Matter. Those are small rubber bullets or rubber pellets, these are big ones. Okay, they come out of bigger pellets like that, and they come out of sort of shotguns. If you get hit by a rubber bullet, wooden pellet or a rubber bullet at the right range, you can break a rib. So these are much more offensive weapons than tear gas, but they are again classified as non-lethal weapons. So good protection to wear, as a bare minimum, I would say wear a bike helmet, but remember what I said. Black is not a great color these days. When I made this slide, it obviously was a good color, but fuchsia pink is now in fashionable. So, if you're wearing swimming goggles for the tear gas, but then the rubber bullets come out, the swimming goggles can shatter. They are not designed to be shot at. If they shatter, the plastic can go in your eyes. So what you need is a ballistic pair of glasses that you can buy at a gun shop or any sort of sporting shop in America, which is not often what I tell people. Okay. And you could also wear a vest. They're expensive, they're cumbersome, they're hot. I don't generally advise them, quite frankly. But if you're really worried about being shot by rubber bullets, that's the kind of thing that you could wear. But it does make you look very militaristic, and it does make the police pay a lot of attention to you, because they're like, who is this person? Why are they wearing that? Are they a threat to us? Okay. Now again, we're talking about having press credentials to hand. So what you could do is, we don't like people showing off their press credentials too much in the crowd, unless the crowd is positive towards the press. So, but you want to have them close to hand, because when the police ask you for your press credentials, you don't want to be fishing around in your back pocket, because the police might think this is, you're reaching for something else. So you could get a little wallet like that, or a runner's wallet. Would you carry your phone in, and what you do is you put it on your bicep, put it on the inside of your bicep. You put your card in the runner's wallet, and when the police stop you and say, who are you? You say, I'm a member of the press. You hold your hands up and you point to your press pass in the runner's bicep. runners. Okay? All make sense? So I'm just conscious of time, so I'm moving through this thing. Okay, this is a standard first aid kit. You can get them at any store. This is just for cuts and bleeds and minor things, right? But if you take a picture of this, these are all good contents. You should probably have a first aid kit with you, whatever you're doing. Now, I'm going to tell you why the police do things in the way they do. So, given the time, I'm not going to bore you with the history of police strategy, but what you need to know now is the police have adopted a strategy called strategic incapacitation. Okay? And what strategic incapacitation means is it works on the philosophy that protests do not happen by themselves. There needs to be someone who organizes them or orchestrates them. And if you neutralize or strategically incapacitate, it's a lovely term, you incapacitate those orchestrators, the protest dies away. That is the philosophy that the police are adopting. So, what they do is they need you to apply for a license for a protest. And when someone applies for a license, they say, which organization has applied? Who are the people who run that organization? Let us carry out surveillance on them and see who they talk to, see what they do, and see who else they engage with. And they need to let them protest, but if they are going to stop the protest, they will neutralize those individuals. So, the way they neutralize people is during the day of the protest, they operate something called spatial control. They create hard and soft zones. Hard zones are where protesters are not allowed to be. Those are areas that are strategically important to a city. In New York, it's Wall Street, as amongst many other places. But why? They don't want people to go where the money is and damage the bull, because that's embarrassing for New York. So if protesters try and attack the bull, as they did during the anti-Occupy movement, they are severely punished by force. But if they go to areas where the police have said you can operate there, those are called soft zones. So the protesters are legally allowed to continue to protest in soft zones. Okay? And the police have demarcated the areas that protesters are allowed to go to when you apply for your license. So when the protest starts in the morning, what the police are doing is they're carrying surveillance out of the crowd and they're looking for the orchestrators. They're identifying them. Okay? And they're saying, where are they standing? And they grid mark the entire area and they are constantly following them. And they will sometimes have surveillance in the crowd, or they will have drones and cameras watching them. Alright? And their whole purpose for most of the day is to follow the orchestrators, because those are the people they want to strategically incapacitate. And when they have decided that they want to incapacitate them, what they do is they send in the line of police that you see, and they then go and arrest those people. But before they do that, they need to chase away the protesters that they do not want to arrest. And they do that by something called kettling or corralling, which police forces in America say they do not do. But a lot of their policing very much looks like kettling to me. Okay? So the way they do kettling, so they're carrying out a police action, there's a protest going on, and they've said, right, we are going to now arrest people. And we only want to arrest the organizers because we do not have enough prison cells for every protester. So we want to arrest the bare minimum. So what they will do is they will insert lines of police officers like this into the crowd to segment and separate the crowd and chase off the people they do not want to arrest, and they chase them off with tear gas and rubber bullets, right? Or just saying get lost. The people they do not want to chase off are the people they want to arrest, and they surround them by lines of people like this. Okay, and so they're surrounding them, corralling them, so they cannot escape. And then once they are happy enough that they have enough people in the kettle, or the minimum amount of people that they can arrest, and they've chased off the other protesters, they will send in the arrest teams. You can recognize arrest teams because they sometimes have a nice sign on their back saying arrest on them, right? Or they will be carrying lots of cable ties. Anyone seen police carry cable ties? Because they are part of the arrest team. And on the campuses, virtually every single police officer had cable ties because they are all going to be carrying out arrests. So, here's the thing to understand. When the police carry out this action, they have adopted a very sort of military style attitude, which means there's a command and control structure. The officers in charge tell the police officers on the line, you are now going to start arrests. The police officers on the line do not have discretion or autonomy of decision making. So once the order comes down that you're going to start arrests, they don't care who you are. If you are in the zone that's demarcated an arrest zone, they will arrest you. And if you are waving a press badge saying, I'm a member of the press, they're like, can't do anything about it, you're in the wrong place, and we'll pick you up. I spoke to a journalist in California who was arrested. And he spoke to the police officers and had a very good rapport with them when things were calm. And things were going quite well. Didn't think much of it. And then he was working for a radio station and to file from his iPhone from the protest. So he went to the side of the protest, he sort of stood against the wall, and he was filing, and the file wouldn't go because there was not enough data or something like that. So he went into tunnel vision, really focused, had to meet his deadline, messing around with his iPhone. What he didn't realize, I don't know how long he was there, but it was quite a while. What he didn't realize is the mood had changed in the crowd. And actually the police line had moved up right next to him. They had sent in the line, and they were going to send in the arrest teams to, because the police action was going on. And one of the police officers who had spoken to him tapped him on the shoulder and said, you have to go. In a gentle warning. And the chap said, yeah, but I've got to do this, and he just wasn't paying attention. And about 5 minutes later, the same police officer put him on the ground and arrested him. Because he was in the arrest zone. Even though the police officer knew he was a journalist and that he wasn't doing any harm, he was in the arrest zone and he had to be siphoned off to the prison cells. Okay? So, watch the police lines. Watch the first thing when you get there, identify the troublemakers or the orchestrators. Because if you go stand with them, that's what the arrest zone often is. Okay? If the police line comes out like this, they mean business. Right? They don't put on all this gear because they like wearing it. It's heavy, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, and they cannot communicate with each other very easily wearing this gear. So when they put it on, it means they're sending in the arrest team soon after. So you have the option to stay to get the action, or you can positionally remove yourself from that location and use an ambulance. Right? Now, it's up to you to be intentional about your decision making. Because you might decide on that day, I need the money shot off the bat and kick in the jaw. But you might say, I don't want to get arrested today, and I need to leave this area. You don't have to go very far away, but you need to exit the arrest zone. Now, the other people who they like to use are these bike police, who look very environmentally friendly, but they use these bikes as weapons, and they will throw them in if they think if they're trying to corral the crowd. So stay away from them because bikes hurt. They're thrown. So good practice, if you can be elevated above the crowd, that means you're at a distance, which is not great for photojournalism, quite frankly. But if you think that the arrest team is going in, or the corral is happening, that's when you want to say, okay, is there somewhere higher up that I can go and capture this? But only go there if there is an exit route for you. Do not get stuck on an elevated position when tear gas is billowing around you, because you can pay a lot. Limit valuables on you, because people get marked, as I've told you, when they leave protests, and always resist the urge to just linger for the sake of it, right? Sometimes journalists get great stories because they just stick it out. But the vast majority of incidents that I've seen or experienced in my 20-year career is because journalists are just hanging around waiting for something to happen, and then something bad happens. So the reason why we're giving you all of this information is to be intentional about your decision making, and don't just say, I'll wait here, maybe something good will come, because maybe it's something bad as well. If you are arrested, now I'm not a lawyer, but this is the sort of general advice we give out. So you need to identify yourself as a journalist to the police officers. If you are stopped, for constitutional reasons, you should ask them if you are allowed to go. I mean, just if they're detaining you in some way or preventing you from doing something. If they do not let you go, it means you are being arrested, and you should be read your Miranda rights or given some sort of indication that you are being arrested by the police. Otherwise, it's an illegal detention, and constitutionally that should be reported. There are lots of hotlines that we can share with you where you should report those things. Always remain polite. Don't do what many of my journalists do, which is, do you know who I am? Okay, you arrest me. Don't get aggressive with them or upset with them. Many of them are just doing their jobs. Some of them are bad actors, but many are just doing their jobs, okay? And some of them have done very bad things as they're arresting journalists. And it might be because they just want to do something bad, they want to pepper spray you, just punish you, or they might be because you've been a bit rude to them. And if you're polite to them, they might not pepper spray you in the face. It's important to write down the number of your lawyer on your arm, not on your phone, not on a piece of paper, because they take all of those things. The only thing you'll have is the number written on your arm. You only get one phone call, or the important number if you're phoning a friend. If you're phoning a friend or a boss or something, make sure that they are able to phone legal representation. And your lawyer should expect your call. They should know you're covering the protest, okay? Or if there's a hotline that you're using, like a free one, phone them up and tell them that you're using the hotline, that you're going out to cover a protest. So you have the right to film and gather content, but you are no different from any other American citizen. You have the same rights as you. It's important to know. Just because you have a press card doesn't make you extra special in the eyes of the police. And it's important to know that state law differs, and trespass is a very important thing to understand, because a number of journalists are arrested for trespass, and on the campuses those are private property, right? So things are slightly different there, and the policing actions that you see, because of the terrain and the geography of those areas and the privacy of those areas, are different from if it's in a public space. And often what the police are doing on campuses, as the behest of the owners of that property, they are removing people who come illegally into the property in the eyes of the police and the owners. Okay? It's important to understand. They are not allowed to delete your footage or even ask to see it. And if they do so, you should be reporting that to a lawyer. I'm not aware of it happening in America, but it might have happened. But very important to note, if the police tell you they are carrying out a police action, and it's a legitimate police action, and they say you're interfering with it, they can arrest you. That in their eyes, and the eyes of the law, is completely valid. Okay? So you need to, if they give you a warning and they say we're about to carry out a police action, please clear this area, that is the warning. And if you stay there because you're wearing your respirator, they fire tear gas at you, they're giving you a warning to leave. They then shoot other bullets at you, and you can't, you still don't leave. They're giving you another warning, and the next will be an arrest. But often, journalists are unable to leave because the corral and the kettle has gone around them, and they have no exit strategy. So you need to, again, be intentional about the decision making. Do you want to be in the corral, or do you want to be outside of it? So you need to watch them and see what they're doing to see if the corral is about to start. And we're done. 5 minutes out of time. I didn't ask if anyone had any questions. I just looked through that. Everyone all right? Okay, great.
This was Awesome.
Uh,
Awesome.
One more round of applause, really quick. This is so fantastic. Thank you guys. I will do my best not to get arrested. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for being here. Again, thank you so much to English Alliance, to CPJ, to our wonderful speakers from both of these. Again, a reminder that on Thursday, June 6th, that's this coming Thursday at 11 a.m., we are going to also be doing one last session in this series of safety workshops. That's going to be Safety Starts with a Contract. Again, that's the 11 a.m. Thursday, June 6th. Go to photoville.nyc/events. You'll be able to find it from there. Also, photoville.nyc/professional development. So, yes, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for in advance for joining us for that one, because personally I'm very excited for it. Lastly, just you're all here, we've all been talking, we all clearly have some things in common for interest, so we would love to invite you over to the beer garden for a beer on us. I have the drink tickets right here in the little pocket, so please, I'll stand over by the exit and hand them off to you as you're exiting, and then anyone who wants to can join in, we can talk a bit, maybe we can answer a few extra questions there if anyone has a thought to mind. Again, thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you for being part of the
Guys, thank you for joining me, and thank you my wonderful YouTubers. This is absolutely so full of information. Stuff I did not know. I'm so glad I know now. This was beyond anything I thought or knew, and I'm so glad that I was able to be here for this incredible event. This was how to work during the protests of the upcoming U.S. election. Okay, guys, I will talk to you soon at our next destination here at Photoville. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want to see more of our Photoville footage, you can continue to watch us on Touchbase Daily each and every day. I will be returning to the desk tomorrow for our regular Touchbase Daily show from 11:15 to 12:15, technically speaking. So I'll be back at the desk tomorrow, and we'll be doing our wonderful week of beautiful programming for our Touchbase Daily. That will be, again, tomorrow Eastern Time, 11:15 to 12:15, and Touchbase Daily here on the Ron Lewis Photos YouTube. And you'll find us also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. But we want you all to join us on YouTube, because YouTube is where you get the best quality. Hats off to YouTube. I hope that this streaming came through clearly, and that everybody was able to hear and see the videos and the footage and the slides. So much information, such good information. Okay, guys, I'm out of here. I'm going to have a beer. Talk to you later. Bye bye.